see you guys in the dark.
I've always been a smart kid, never afraid to ask why, until I finally got an answer. One day, I heard the phrase, Amber Alert, and asked my mother. She explained what it meant, as well as the origin of the name. We didn't have much money growing up, and were on WIC for a time. It was even more restrictive than it is now, and I'd frequently had to run to the back of the store, Walmart, for convenience, to swap out for the correct item and not hold up the line. I was also very independent and had a watch so my mother could tell me, meet me in the milk section in 10 minutes, and I could go browse the book section as I was easily bored. Due to an incident at a museum years back, my parents instructed me that if I got separated from them, to seek an employee and tell them my parents' names, asking for them to be paged, which I needed to do a few times. This happened back when I was around 7 or 10 years old, in the 90s. On more than one occasion, here is my most vivid memory. I'd saved enough money to buy a toy, and was given permission to go pick one out. Lego was too expensive, but I wanted to look at them anyways first. I'm checking prices just in case when I hear a voice. It's not Mom or my brother, so I ignore it. I hear it again and turn around to look. It's an older person. Now, a lot of adults look old to children, but I placed her as older than my mother, at least 40, if not 50. She asked if I was lost. I told her no, and that I knew where my mom was, and that I was just looking. Okay then, she replies, and grabs my arm, and starts to drag me with her. I didn't go to exactly the nicest school, but had been involved in several fights as early as kindergarten. I was later diagnosed with both a mood disorder and PTSD, which helped explain my school problems as well as demonstrate how little help I received. My parents always said to me, after each call from the principal, I shouldn't default to violence, as we were pacifists, which I tried to keep in mind, but my temper still got the best of me. I tell her to let me go. She doesn't listen. I start trying to tug free, and begin yelling that I'm not going to go with her, and that she needs to let me go. She still doesn't let go, so I start hitting her, hand and arm, kicking and beginning to scream for her. A few people walk over and ask what's wrong. I quickly explain, and she finally lets me go. She then claims she was just helping me as I was lost, and I am then scolded by the bystanders for being disrespectful, because clearly the old woman was just lonely and meant no harm. I'm then allowed to leave and run to my mom. I'm more confused than upset at this point and tell her what happened. My mom tells me I went violent and that was wrong, and she didn't seem convinced I was telling the full truth, as I tended to exaggerate back then, but she did believe me that I'd been grabbed. Don't remember if I had bruises or not. Walmart seems to attract some real pieces of work, because I found myself in more than a few similar situations over the years, but both genders and many ages, potential kidnappers of Walmart. Let's not meet.
When I was a freshman in college in October of 2018, a guy I'll call Ron Jones stalked me. I met Ron through one of our mutual friends, Chris, because they were in a school club together. When I met Ron, I thought he was kind of strange, but he was nice and seemed interesting. He claimed to be Slavic and had an accent to back that up. I just thought he might be weird because of cultural differences. I go to school in a rural, southern area, and I figured the cultural shock between here and wherever he was originally from was a lot to handle. Anyway, we exchanged numbers and texted infrequently for a couple of weeks. On October 3rd, 2018, a friend of mine and I went to a drag show on our campus. We weren't out super late, but it was dark when the show ended, and we began walking back to our dorm. I'd been texting Ron a bit during the night because he was unable to get a ticket to the drag show, and he wanted to know how it was. At some point in the conversation, I mentioned that I wanted to grab some orange juice on the way back to my dorm. Don't know why I mentioned that to him. I think I was just making some conversation. My friend and I stopped in a convenience store near our building so that I can get said orange juice, and Ron was already there. He said something about buying the juice for me, and I thanked him, but declined. He got kind of mad and started to walk away, which was odd to me, but I just let it go. My friend and I walked out of the store, and I saw that he was standing outside. Our dorm was actually right across from the building the convenience store was in, so he saw us enter the building. My friend and I parted ways, and I walked up to my dorm room, which was on the second floor of the building facing the convenience store. I kick myself for doing this now, but I went to my window, opened it, and yelled down to Ron when I saw that he was still standing there. I apologized for declining his offer to buy the juice for me because I felt like I had been rude. He stood below my window and started talking to me about random stuff, and at one point, he said something that was odd. He was like, "Can I flirt with you? I enjoy doing that." And I just laughed and said, okay, because I had no clue how to respond to that, and I just figured that he was flirtatious. Stupid, I know, but that's not the dumbest thing that I did. I ended up going outside to sit and talk to Ron for a little bit because I felt bad for being rude earlier. While we were outside, he didn't say anything of note, and he was acting pretty normal. It got cold out, so he asked if he could go inside to talk. I told him sure. At this point in the year, I'd had several guy friends over to my room just to work and chat, so I didn't see an issue with it, and things started out normally, but they quickly got scary. Out of nowhere, Ron basically turned into a different person when we were alone in my room. He stopped blinking, he held eye contact super intensely, and he was laughing in this really low, creepy way. On top of that, his Slavic accent disappeared. That's when he told me that he had lied about being Slavic, and he's native to the state our college is in. He got increasingly more creepy, and there was nothing I could do about it because I had a single room my freshman year. At one point, he grabbed me in a hug and wouldn't let go of me until I said, "Let go of me, right now," 3 times or so to him. He told me that he'd done a lot of bad things, and that if I wanted to put him in jail, he would give me the names of people who have evidence against him. He said he hates Jews and blacks, and everyone until they give him a reason not to hate them. He said a lot of weird, nearly sexual stuff to me as well. Like he went on and on about how showering alone isn't fun, and that it's better with another person, and that he'd be willing to do that if I wanted to. He even said he'd go after me if he weren't dating someone, which freaked me out. He asked if he could sleep in my room, and I said no, and I used that to tell him that I was ready for bed, and that he needed to leave. As he left, he said, "Do you want to know how unsecure the locks on your door really are?" He also pulled out a few IDs out of his wallet, all with different names. I closed the door on him and looked through the peephole. He stood there looking at the door for an uncomfortably long time before leaving. After that, he called me multiple times throughout the month, always at weird times. He started appearing everywhere I was around campus. The friend who had introduced us, Chris, actually started walking everywhere with me because he noticed Ron would follow me around, lurking around every corner when I couldn't see him. Apparently he was around me a lot more than I realized because Chris began carrying a knife whenever he went to places. Ron was everywhere, and he would come up to me and put his arm over me, whisper stuff like, "We need to talk," whenever he saw me. For a while he would lurk outside my dorm, but that stopped all of a sudden one day. I later found out that Chris had told my RA about Ron, and that he had been banned from my building. I hadn't done that stuff myself because I thought I was overreacting. I really wasn't. I blocked him on my phone, and he hasn't contacted me since. He did apologize to me one day on campus last semester when we ran into each other, and I was actually willing to accept it and move on until recently. So here I am, 2 years later, and everything that happened with Ron has come back up again. I found out recently that he has a history of stalking women, like an extensive history of going back to at least 5 years. I met another victim of his who he stalked before coming to my university. She had gone to community college for a little bit, and he stalked her while he was also a student there. He followed her to our university after apparently being suspended from the school after 3 separate stalking incidents were linked to him. The victim I met told me something worrying. Ron is currently an RA on our campus, and she was one of his residents. When she told the residential office that Ron had stalked her in the past, they told her all they could do was have her move dorms, which she did. They then said that they couldn't do anything to discipline him because the stalking didn't occur at our university. She and I both reported our experiences with him to the residential office, who then tipped off the campus police, who then spoke to the dean of students. The thing is, though, when I gave his name to the residential office, they had no idea who I was talking about. He'd even given me a fake first and last name, and I had to do a lot of searching to find out his real name. I knew he was sketchy when I saw the 4 separate IDs in his wallet, but I didn't even think he'd given me a fake name when I met him. After talking to Residential Living, I talked to the police. When I talked to the police, they didn't seem to care about what I had to say. Actually, the officer that I spoke to talked over me while I was explaining the times he followed me, and said that he'd heard all he needed to hear. I spoke to the dean of students, who asked me some clarifying questions about the police report he'd received. The police had mixed up several details of my story with the stories of other victims. Apparently more people than just myself and the girl that I met have come forward with information about this person. There are even reports that he got physical with 2 separate people before coming to this university. Last week I saw him on campus. He's still an RA, even though multiple women have spoken to higher-ups about his behavior. If I hear from him, I'm issuing a no-contact order to ensure that he stays away from me. Right now, though, that feels like too much of a hassle because we're all going home for a 2-month break due to COVID education anyways. That's kind of it. It's pretty anticlimactic, and there's no sense of justice in all of this. But hopefully this story teaches you all to stay on your toes, and not to think that you're overreacting when someone is being sketchy. Stay safe out there, guys. About a year ago, someone knocked on my bedroom window, around 8 or so. I was just sitting there watching TV, and I heard it. I called my husband's name, and he went to go check. My daughter, who was 13, came out of the bathroom and said that she thinks she might have heard someone knock on the bathroom window. No one was ever scared by this because our neighborhood is very active, and people are always outside, so we reasoned it as just some odd noise and let it go. About an hour later, while everyone is going to bed, my daughter lets out the most horrific scream that I've ever heard. My husband and I ran into the living room, and she flings herself into my arms, then faints. When she comes to, she tells us that someone banged on her window, and she looked over. She saw a man staring at her. Of course, we called the police, and my husband starts searching our property and the house next to ours. It's been empty for years. Cops find nothing. Next day, we add extra locks. I nail the curtains down so that they can't move, and we try to move on. About 2 weeks later, the person comes back, just tapping, and since then it's been pretty regular. Tapping, knocking, pretending to be a cat. I saw him on our porch. My 8-year-old saw him peeping through the window on the front door. We have called the police. We have stayed up all night waiting. We have hidden trying to catch this person outside. Nothing works. No one can catch this guy. The kids either sleep in the living room or our bedroom. We can't go out after dark. We don't stay home alone. The cops patrol, and we have a detective investigating this, but he's never caught. He came back last night at 2 a.m., but the kids were too scared to get out of bed to wake us up. We are trying to move, and I have ordered cameras. My landlord wouldn't let me get cameras until I had the detective call him. I'm scared to go to sleep because I don't want to miss the text message from my kid telling me that he's here, and her have to be scared until she passes out again. So I'm a 20-year-old female, lived in a shady-as-hell apartment complex in an otherwise rich suburban area for 3 years, and have lots of stories that could fit on here. But this one is about a neighbor I'll call Bob. A little backstory. I was 18 at the time, and my then 16-year-old sister used to babysit all the neighborhood kids. These kids considered us their friends. And it got to where they seemed to have a radar of when me and my sister went outside. They'd come out and talk to us, and we let them ride our skateboards and such in the parking lots. The kids were aged 8 to 13. So one day we were outside with them, and we were joined by a stranger. He stood between us and our car, towering over us. He introduced himself and asked us to sign a petition that he made up. We did, just being friendly. Then he asked us how old we were. I thought maybe he was a fellow stranger that looked older, or that he was just awkward. So I told him that I was 18, and the very next question was if I wanted to go out with him, in front of my mom and the other kids' moms. I awkwardly declined, but he continued talking about how he thought me and my sister were in middle school. Also, he was 28. Eventually, he wandered away to ask someone else to sign his petition. A few days later, he knocked at our door, after asking neighbors of ours for the address. He had a bag of what he said was chicken and wanted us to go eat it with him at the park. We declined because we both had some schoolwork to do. He walked away, and as he was mumbling about how antisocial everyone was. Later, we look out our window and see him playing basketball with 2 girls. He kept physically moving their arms to different positions, even though they shrugged away from him. Next day, one of the kids runs up to me. I'll call her Maddie. She's 8. She got a new pair of Heelys and wanted help with them. I was holding her hand and guiding her along when Bob appears and says he can help better. Maddie says no, but he insists. He pushed me aside and reaches for Maddie, holding her tightly around the upper chest area. Her grandmother was there too and flips out. He just wanders away. The next day, Maddie is freaking out, saying Bob was just sitting on her porch when she left for school that morning. Her parents found out, and as they walked outside, he let himself in, and they said he went to their kitchen to make orange chicken. We later found out another neighbor had a similar story to this. Another time, we were helping a family move. They had a 2-year-old son. The garages are in a triangle shape to the road, almost as a roundabout. There's a flat patch of grass behind them. Well, here comes Bob to help us. He criticizes the way we packed things, and didn't help until our neighbor politely asked him to leave. Well, he left the garage, but instead of leaving, he asked the 2-year-old if he wanted to play. The kid said no, and it made him mad. He picked up the kid to play, and the kid slapped him. He asked the kid if he wanted to go behind the garages to play ball. The kid's mom didn't notice at all, so I go with them and guide the kid to his mom. The climax of this story is when me and my sister went on a walk with our 17-year-old friend and her other friend. Maddie found us and wanted to come along. So we are starting out when Bob comes out. He sees our friend and asks how old she is and how much she weighs because she's so skinny. He asks where we're going. My friend tells him we're going for ice cream on a girls' trip. We didn't ask her to say that. He's like, "Aw, man," and then stomps away. We continue our walk, but halfway through, we have a weird feeling. I look behind us, and Bob is running towards us. He yells at us for hiding from him while also telling Maddie how pretty she is. An older neighbor sees this and asks him what's going on. He tells the man we're being mean, and he needs to go write a song about us. He leaves, but we see him sitting at the park. Well, he saw us, and again came running. We stop, and he asks which one of us is over 18. Maddie's dad is here at this point and tells him we aren't interested in him. He explodes, telling the dad to go fuck himself, and that he's rudely calling me a bitch. Maddie is crying, and the neighbor who saw us before came to check on us since he saw Bob running. Bob goes inside, muttering to himself. For weeks, we don't see him. A single dad and his 5-year-old daughter move in, and we are introducing ourselves to them. My mom kind of tips him off that there's someone in the building who is a little off, especially around Maddie. The dad said that he's seen someone like that giving kids candy at the pool when the kids looked uncomfortable. Well, here comes Bob, as if on cue. He immediately tells the girl in front of her dad that she looks like a movie star and that she's so pretty. He asks to go play with her, but the dad says no, and then they go inside. Turns out they're next-door neighbors. We still didn't see much, but other neighbors were telling us their stories about him. There's a woman who's alone most of the day with her 2 kids under 5, who told us that he watches her when she goes to and from her car. Also, Maddie's parents continue to see him watching her. Then one day, we're again babysitting, and here he comes. Only this time, he's swinging nunchucks. Maddie screams and hides in our car. Bob strolls over with his nunchucks and starts talking to us all casual. Then his head cranes to look into the car, and he says, "Where's Maddie?" We told him she wasn't here, and then he walked away. By then, most of the kids were afraid to go outside when they saw him. He had a habit of wandering around the complex. We could tell by his height and lanky gait. A few times we'd see Bob with his dad. These times, neither ever glanced at us. Then one day, he just stopped showing up. We'd see his dad and brother come in and out all the time, but never him. We only saw him about a year later. It was only for one day near Christmas, and then he disappeared again. So I don't know what happened to him, but it was just one of our weird experiences with neighbors in the 3 years living there. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos, and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.